Hi, everybody. I don't know how many of you have joined us, but I'm excited that you're all here. Let me just introduce myself. So I'm the founder and CEO of Cosmic Centaurs, and I'm really so excited to be hosting this inaugural edition of the Cosmic Conference. As you all know, the theme is about the future of work and specifically the impact of remote work on the post-pandemic world. Today's panel discussion is all about the impact of the pandemic on digital transformation and technology. We like to joke that internet had the potential to catalyze a remote work movement, but it didn't. It took a pandemic to get us there. 30 years later, organizations and individuals have only now started to truly evolve their ways of working. The session will explore the role of technology and how it plays an important part in the future of work and how we can use it to our advantage. I, for one, I'm a big proponent of technology and human partnership because I think that that's the way forward in creating happier, healthier employees and more productive organizations. Just a few housekeeping items before we start. This is a reminder for you to like our video, and then most importantly, feel free to ask any questions that you have for our panelists in the comment section. At the end of the session in our Q&A, I'll try to make sure and pick up on your questions and get our panelists to give you their thoughts. If you want to share any content, you can use the hashtag Cosmic Conference. You can to keep up the conversation on Twitter, LinkedIn, Facebook, or anywhere else. Without further ado, let's get started. I'll start by introducing our panelists. I'll be your moderator for the day, and I'm joined by three amazing panelists, and I'm really grateful that they came for our inaugural session. So first up, we have Dhiren Bhatia. He's the founder of Cloudscape Technology, a team that's on a mission to enable inventory-based businesses to simplify operations using modern technology systems. With over a decade of experience in managing technology teams for two of the largest banking firms in North America, he's also the founder of the Elevated Entrepreneur blog and podcast. And I really encourage you to go and subscribe to his podcast, as well as mine, which is called Who Run the World. On this podcast, he talks about other business owners and helps the entrepreneur community foster ideas and grow together. Also joining us is Nihal Fahad, who's the partner onboarding manager at Exceeders. I have a special place in my heart for Nihal. She was actually one of the first people to give me a break when I started Cosmic Centaurs. Exceeders is an IT solutions marketplace that gathers the most innovative IT providers from across the globe to provide customers with the latest innovations. And Nihal, who has over 12 years of experience working in the Gulf IT sector, is the one who finds, recruits, and onboards these innovative technology partners from around the world to bring their products and services to the GCC. And last but not least, Renad Jabaji. She's the head of Middle East at Jandi, which is a team collaboration platform similar to Slack, but who knows, maybe they'll kick their ass this year, with a global footprint of over 2 million registered users in over 60 countries. Renad has worked at startups and multinationals focused on developing enterprise cloud technology. She started as an architect, just like me, and that's only one of the things that we found that we had in common. And she is a tech evangelist on the international stage, leading the vision and strategy for software as a service since 2010. Okay, you've heard enough from me. Now we want to hear from our panelists. We're going to start with some questions that all of our panelists will answer. And the really amazing thing is that Dhiren, Renad, and Nihal all come from sort of different technology spaces, and I think that the sum of their insights is going to be fascinating. So I'll start with our first question for the day, which is to understand what the pandemic has done for your business and where you've seen growth and demand in terms of what you do and how it is expressed and what that tells us about the demand on the technology landscape. So I'm going to start with Nihal for this one. Maybe you can give us your point of view.
Sure. So first of all, thank you, Marilyn, for organizing this. It's a really great thing. It's actually my first online conference. So it's fascinating for all of us. Regarding what it's done for our business, so I think I can speak for everyone when I say that we're really fortunate, the IT industry. We weren't hit as hard as other industries, obviously. For us, we've actually had a rise in the demand for some products. and services. So we've had some services or products that we provide come to kind of like a pause. So things that were once nice to have right now are at a standstill. But then on the flip side of it, there's a lot of urgency and need for other products and services that we're providing. So that's especially true because we work with regionally, we work with the government, the oil and gas, banking. So we work with organizations of all sizes, but largely with enterprise organizations. So large-scale organizations. And I think they're the ones that were hit the hardest in terms of being prepared for remote working. And that's where the demand is coming from.
So do you see most of the requests being on the remote work suite that you offer?
Yes, so we are getting a lot of requests, not just for the remote work suite, which is very important, but also even things for securing systems for remote access, support requests for overcoming issues with VPN. So I would say the requests are coming across the board, but yes, so specifically the remote work suite is very in demand.
Brilliant, thank you. Dhiren, what's your point of view? You focus more on the retail and hospitality side of the world.
Yeah, and I have to say, businesses has never been busier. I think a lot of businesses are now moving online. Everyone's talking about e-commerce, and we've been working very hard to keep up with that demand. The other thing that's happened in our business is we've gone online. I mean, we've been talking about it for many, many years to be a fully online business. And now we have the opportunity to not only sell and demo online, but also deliver the entire project online. So we've been fortunate in that we had that infrastructure already ahead of time. So we deliver everything now completely online. And I think that's a great part of great turnout from this sad sort of event. But hey, it's a great step forward.
So essentially, not only are you helping your clients digitize, but you've also completely digitized your own ability to offer services and products to them.
Indeed, absolutely. So we collaborate online. We pretty much run all of our projects online. We then support our clients online. So we've got some amazing tool sets, which we're going to get into in a few minutes, I'm sure. But yeah, absolutely. We've been able to convert everything online. And so we actually don't get to see any of our customers in person anymore, which is maybe a sort of a downside of the thing. But hey, I mean, our customers love that for us. And we're happy that we can afford that and give that service.
Excellent. Renad, tell us about Jandi. Companies in the region might have not focused as much on communication tools internally over the past few years, but I'm pretty sure that has changed now. What has your experience been with organizations in the region? Oh, here we go. You have to unmute yourself. There you go.
What the pandemic has done is really helped us, helped people understand the importance of collaboration tools and in general hosted services. So we've seen an increase in our user base globally, at least it's helped us expand globally. We've got about 80% growth in our users just since March. And that's we've hit the 2 million registered user mark, which is huge for a startup. And now we're more or less in 60 countries, which before the pandemic, I think it was close to 20. So we've seen that. The other thing that was interesting, I think, is we've seen the urgency happen. So when you try to sell software, you have to create a sense of urgency to get people to sign up. But the pandemic just did that for us. I mean, what used to take 2 to 6 months for us to close an enterprise account now takes 2 to 6 weeks. So that's
a pretty impressive, speed at which this is moving.
I just want to add to what Renad was saying. Absolutely, I think when you're in the business of implementing systems and selling systems, you have to create this sense of urgency. But the pandemic has really flipped that equation to say, customers are now sort of lining up to say, I'm ready. I wanted to go online yesterday. Can we make this happen quicker? So absolutely great point. I think that sense of urgency is now coming from their end rather than from our end.
Yeah.
That's quite impressive. And yeah, I always talk about the fact that technology was never the barrier really to what people refer to as digital transformation. It's always been about people, and people really hate change. Even physically, our bodies just don't appreciate it when things change around us. Even when you move to a better home, you get upset because things are not where they're supposed to be. And the barrier's always been human mentality and sort of growing out of thinking that you don't need this technology or that things are fine the way that they are. And it's an interesting thing that it took a pandemic for us to sort of shift our mentalities in that sense. And I think another question that those who are listening to this might find interesting is if you're working in a company, if you're a manager or a leader, what do you think is one of the most important technology choices that you can make this year? Like, what would you say is the first thing that you need to think about? Maybe we can start with Nihal again.
Yeah, so before the pandemic, we used to categorize customers or organizations that we work with as small, medium, large. Today, we categorize them as either COVID ready or non-COVID ready. And what we usually mean by COVID ready is that organization ready to provide their services and their products online. And when we say products or services, it doesn't necessarily mean like for retail. We even mean government, for example. Are they ready to do the processes online? Are they ready to deal with customers online? So for those who are not COVID ready, I think the choice is obvious, like be COVID ready by adopting some sort of a system, something similar to what, for example, Cloudscape is doing, and just get online basically, and make sure that you're interacting with your customers online, because it isn't going away. COVID will go away, hopefully, but the fact that people are interacting now more than ever, and getting services and getting products online, that isn't going to go away anytime soon. In fact, I believe it will increase even after the pandemic. So that's the obvious option, I would say. And just
that
to add, yeah, for those who are COVID ready, people management. So something similar to what Jandi is doing, and basically something to make sure you can monitor outcomes for online work, because that also is probably around to stay.
Yeah, a lot of the conversation in that sense is we go from seeing the face, which means we see our employees in our office and we can see whether they're getting things done, to seeing the work. And there's definitely a need to be able to measure that output in a meaningful way. That's brilliant. Thank you, Nihal. Dhiren, what do you think?
Absolutely. I think I'm going to build on what Nihal was talking about. I think a lot of businesses want to go online. I think where the disconnect sometimes I find is that their back-end systems are not typically connected to their front end. So there's literally a situation where the left hand is not talking to the right hand. I think I want to be able to comment to that bit, to have businesses be aware of the fact that it has to be a unified presence. So it's not about just going online and then dealing with that. It's also about making sure that the back end is ready to handle that demand. And so having some sort of data transfer or data information sync between the back end and the front end, really, really important. And I think the other tool set that a lot of businesses, including mine, have picked up is collaboration. So collaboration online, speaking, sharing, documentation, all of that. And even using some sort of project management tool. So I think those have become really, really important. I know in the last few months, I've got a lot of conversations happening about what project management tools you use and what collaboration tools you use. So some of those basic necessities, now they've become basic necessities, I think are very, very important for a business. So Slack and Google, and I know we've talked about this offline, like Trello and Asana. These sort of tools are really, really key to a business and an organization's success.
Yeah, I mean, I want to echo a couple of the points you're making. I think that definitely, I think companies really usually tend to focus a lot on their users or their consumers or their customer, and they make a lot of really beautiful, bold promises to them, but then they don't give their employees the tools they need to deliver on those promises. And I think there's definitely a disconnect between those things. And I always talk to this about our clients. It's equally important to be user-centric, but when you're user-centric, those users have to include the people who work for you. Otherwise, you just can't deliver on your promise. And a lot of questions came to us about what stacks do you use?
I don't think it's also just about that they don't want to. I think they don't know or they don't realize it. So I hope that something like this sort of picks up a a point in their mind to say, what can I do better in my organization from a back-end perspective, from a user perspective, internal stakeholders, how do I make their journeys better? So a great conversation to have.
Absolutely. Renad, we're talking also about collaboration, communication, and efficiency inside the organization. Where do you see the most important technology choice happening there?
So I think that companies are going to start to migrate their solutions and their infrastructure from on-premise to cloud. I think it's the only way to support telework and maintain their business continuity. And an interesting story, I won't say who, I was chatting with a family member, and they decided to adopt a collaboration tool, and they're trying to do it so they worked with the company to deploy it on premise and single sign-on, and they've complicated it to a point where nobody's adopted it, nobody's using it, and they're still emailing each other between teams. So at some point, these big companies that are so concerned about security are going to realize that they're banking online personally, and they need to at some point, if they trust their money in the cloud. So I just think that we're going to see companies give in and start to move their solutions and infrastructure to the cloud.
Can I just add to what Renad was saying? I think Renad mentions a really good point. A lot of businesses, like I was saying, even Nihal mentioned this earlier, we all want to go online. We've seen a lot of businesses say, yeah, we want to go online. But I think rolling out that software system, whether it's e-commerce or a collaboration suite or anything of that matter, requires some sort of planning and some sort of attention to detail. Maybe even in some sorts, do it in phases rather than just roll it out across the board. So I just wanted to highlight that I think a lot of businesses may get sort of inundated and overwhelmed with the idea of rolling out a new system. But I think if you do it in pieces, maybe just pick a pilot set of users, roll it across them and test that out, and then roll it across the organization, they might be more successful in doing something like that.
Yeah, that's a very fair point. Yes, Nihal, please.
Yeah, sorry. And just to add to what Dhiren said, exactly, and roll out an MVP, maybe something smaller. So prior to the pandemic, we had customers with really big ambitions, and when they wanted to roll out any services or even a portal or a mobile app, they wanted it to all come out and come out amazing with like 600 different features, and that it had to do everything under the sun. But honestly, now there's been a rise in the realization that if they want something out fast and effective, then it needs to be done in parts. So like Dhiren is advising, basically, like something to do the necessities, and then you can build on it as you go along.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think that's a very good point. I always, when I talk to clients or students, sometimes I always joke about the fact that the problem with people who come from this part of the world is that we all had like Oriental mothers, in the sense, whether it's India or Lebanon or anywhere in the region, that have taught us that we're not allowed to fail and we have to get everything right the first time. And because of that, we kind of don't have the sense that it's okay to start with one small thing and maybe it won't work really well and we'll try again, and that's not really ingrained into our culture.
We'll build on it. You start with a foundation and you go up. So yeah.
Absolutely. All right, I have a question for Dhiren specifically. Again, you're very focused on the retail and hospitality industry, and I was wondering if you had any stories about creative solutions that your clients have developed over the last few months, and maybe what we can learn from that.
Yeah, actually, great question. And I think this is the beauty about living in times like these, where you have such amazing clients that do amazing things. So I'll give you a couple of examples. We actually have a client named Moishi, and they do amazing Japanese ice creams across Dubai and across Abu Dhabi. And Carol, the founder, actually, we were talking about it. And not only did she launch a complete e-commerce brand online and go through that entire development cycle, but she actually even launched a brand new segment of her products for the home consumer, which I think is amazing. And to be able to launch that so quickly, have that manufactured, have that product assembled, and then even marketed to, is an amazing success story. And I think that's primarily because of the technology stack that we've implemented for her. She's able to do this much faster and at a much rapid speed than many other businesses do. So I think she saw an opportunity and she took that opportunity by the horns, as you would say it, and actually released that. And I think she's doing really, really well. So if you ever wanted to try Japanese ice creams, now they're to go at a grocery store. And the other one example that I want to talk about is we have another client, Amazon is for you. They do acai products. So they import acai products from Amazon, from Brazil, and sell them here. One of the things that they did during the pandemic is launch what we call the B2B portal. So instead of their salesperson not being able to go to their consumers, they've now launched an internal website that their big customers can log in with their own username and password, see all their prices, actually even place orders. So what started to become an impediment is now become a great motivator, so that the sales team doesn't have to travel. They don't have to worry about making site visits. Everything is now done online. The customer can log in, see their own prices, place orders at 3 a.m. So when the team comes in the morning, they have nothing to do but accept the order and ship it out. So great success stories, I think, that have come up during this time just because of the technology that they've chosen and gone with, and using 100% of that technology. I think those are the two examples that I think are that stand out right now for me.
Yeah, companies are definitely guilty of only using 5% of the technology that they use. It's like that myth about our brain. Those are really incredible stories, and a real also focus on speed of execution, and technology enables you to do that. That's really brilliant. Renad, I have a question for you. I mean, you offer really resourceful technology solutions, and I know that this really enables remote teams to collaborate and communicate profoundly. Maybe tell us about an interesting case study that emerged from the pandemic and what we can learn from how your clients are implementing this technology.
Yeah, so okay, I have two very different stories to share. One of our stories is when the pandemic hit South Korea. We had a media company call us, and they had made an executive decision to shift 100% of their employees to remote work, and they had to do it come Monday. So they had 1 week. And they were in panic mode, saying, is it possible to deploy Jandi across the whole organization in 1 week? And we're like, yeah, I mean, it's going to take some training and onboarding, but it's doable. So that's one customer waiting for an emergency to happen to force their hand. And then we have another customer here in UAE, Mawarid. They distribute cosmetics and makeup and FMCG to retail outlets in UAE and Abu Dhabi. They had implemented Jandi probably 3 or 4 months before the pandemic, and they had already trained all their promoters and everybody in there. So they had 60 promoters, I think, across 44 outlets. Submitting sales reports and actively using Jandi for their collaboration. When the pandemic hit and everybody was working from home, they were fine. I mean, sales took a hit, but it got to a point where we were ready to go back to the office, and they didn't want to. They're like, well, we can do everything from home now, so why are we going to go back to the office? So very different stories, very different experiences. I think the lesson learned here is before the pandemic, collaboration solutions were considered a luxury or a nice to have. And now it's just become a necessity. I think people's perception changed.
Nihal, I was asking you that you have a suite of software tools that enables the transition to remote work. And we've seen a lot of interesting remote work models kind of emerge from the pandemic, and companies have kind of been a bit creative about this. Some have downsized their offices, some have canceled them entirely. I was wondering if you can tell us about some of the biggest challenges that you've seen your clients face, but also what kind of interesting work models have emerged from that, and how we can use these examples to be creative about our own remote work models.
Yeah, so I'd say the biggest challenge, you actually mentioned it earlier. I think the biggest challenge is probably adoption. So I keep mentioning this, but KPMG did a really interesting study a few years ago. And across the board globally, the CTOs and CIOs saw the biggest challenge to digital transformation has been adoption. I think that especially with the organizations that we work with, IT managers have such a huge responsibility. And honestly, they've been working round the clock, literally, since everybody had to go home. They've been working day and night to try to get people connected, and they're suddenly responsible not just for connectivity and security, but they're even responsible for I would say employee efficiency. So this suddenly became their burden. And an additional burden is adoption. And I think that it's really important that, companies and organizations out there know that they can actually offload this burden to other organizations, that there are companies, for example, partners that we work with and Exceeders and like even you, Cosmic Centaurs and stuff that know about adoption and that can do this for an organization. And that very few organizations were actually ready to do this sort of thing and to roll out technology adoption for tens, hundreds, and even thousands of employees. Having said that, we've seen some really creative techniques and solutions from a lot of our customers in rolling out technology. So obviously the need has kind of led the charge. So just the fact that people need to use it, and it's the only way that they can connect or make requests or get things processed, that has really taken led in terms of the adoption scenario. But yeah, we've had other customers engage with us for like marketing campaigns, internal marketing campaigns for their employees, using specific tools that we provide, for example, like Identity to make announcements, to connect through mobile applications, just to make sure that their employees had somewhere to understand the new technology and to use it effectively.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely echo that. I think your tool around using your employees to kind of amplify your message is really genius. I'm always a big fan of that myself.
Yeah, and that's been really effective. And we actually used a similar tool with one of the bigger organizations here in Abu Dhabi. They needed to roll out a kind of request management software to a whole small city, actually. And basically, they didn't want people coming to the facility to make these requests, which is what it used to be. And we were actually able to do that in a matter of days. And more importantly, they were able to educate users who were not IT users. And they were not even, a lot of them were not even employees. So regular citizens and people who may not have access to that sort of technology, they were able to roll it out using some adoption methodologies within days. So we were really happy.
Can I just quickly add to what Nihal was saying? I think the other thing that's coming to me from this discussion is the fact that consistency is key. So when you're rolling out something new, it's sometimes there's so much of messaging coming back from the employee base to say, hey, this isn't working. And I think the secret to success is keep consistent, stay with it, and bear through it and run through it. It may be painful in the beginning, and it's important to keep going.
Yeah, I was discussing this with a client recently, and I told them my story about trying to get my teams to use Microsoft Teams at the time. And the way that I got this accomplished was that I gave them a cutoff time. And I said, you know what, after this day, if you ever share a file with me or ask me a question and the thing that I need to look at is not on Teams, I'm just not going to answer you. And like you said earlier, people really don't like change, but then when it became part of their routine, they couldn't live without it anymore. There's something about seeing what's in front of you, and at first you're really hesitant and you're not interested. And I think definitely managers have a big role in adoption. This is not an IT problem or an HR problem. It's about every person who's leading a team signing on, knowing that technology always isn't perfect, and there's always going to be one thing that it doesn't do really well. You just have to know what it is and be comfortable with the trade-off and explain the trade-off to your teams. But definitely we have a big role to play in that. There's a question coming from the Q&A, and I really want to encourage our audience to also keep asking them. Someone asked, companies have jumped the gun and accelerated their digital transformation journeys. I'm very critical of the word digital transformation myself usually. And the question says, what do you think comes after digital transformation?
I don't think there's an after. I think it's just an ongoing. I think it's an ongoing process, because every month, every quarter, every year, we're going to have new, better technologies, and I think it's going to continue. So I think it's not about ending the journey. I think it's really starting it, and I think that COVID helped so many organizations across the board kickstart digital transformation. I don't see it ending, honestly. I don't think there's going to be an after.
And I think just to add to what Nihal is saying, and like Marilyn, you said, digital transformation is that word. It is a very ambiguous word. It's been thrown around a lot over the last few years. But I think it's nothing but just about being able to do what you were doing offline, online. And as you were learning to do it offline, you continue to learn to do it online. And like Nihal was saying, it's not a journey. It's not something that you start and you stop. It's a constant evolution. You keep getting better and better. So the same way, a retailer is able to change the display of his store and change the goods every day. I think the same way, when you're online, you get to learn how to do things better and make that process more efficient and more effective. And an example that I can give you is, in our case, we were doing a lot of offline sales, and we've now taken that and we've moved that completely online from our introduction to our demo. The entire sales process is online. And yeah, that's part of digital transformation, but we don't see it like that. We see it as an ongoing evolution. I think most businesses are figuring the same thing out, how they can keep going in that evolution, as Nihal was saying.
Renad, what's your perspective on that?
Digital transformation, I think it just means change. I think it means companies changing something that's, they're currently doing. That's transformation. So companies will continue to transform and innovate and do things differently and learn. So I'm with you guys on that one.
So actually, Dhiren told us a little bit about how digital transformation has occurred within his own organization, because I know that you all help other people do that. But I was also interested in seeing, Renad and Nihal, how has digital transformation come out inside your organizations? How is working different for you guys now as opposed to before the pandemic? Nihal, maybe you can start.
Yeah, so for us, we've actually been working remotely for years now. So we have locations across the region and beyond, and so we've been working remotely with a lot of our partners and employees, and so that hasn't really changed. What we've had to adjust to, just like Renad mentioned earlier, is the speed and the urgency of the requests that are coming from the customers. So where something used to take 6 months to basically from the request phase, I would say, to closing, now it's taking a week. And so that has made us, we've had to become more agile. We've had to become faster at responding. We've had to adjust our working hours. Sometimes we've had teams who pull all-nighters because, something needs to get done within the coming 1 or 2 days. So I think it's just made everything faster, and it's a good problem to have. We feel really fortunate to be working at a time like this, and that's how it has impacted us.
Renad, what about you? The headquarters of your organization are in South Korea. How do you manage all of that?
Well, we've also been working remotely for probably 6 years as a company. So nothing changed for us in the sense of how we work internally. But I guess for me, I'm able to meet people more than I was able to before. Granted, the meetings are on Zoom, but people are more accepting to, sending them a message on LinkedIn, hey, can we hop on a 10-minute Zoom call instead of, meeting at a coffee shop. So I'm able to meet more people, I find, and I'm really enjoying that aspect of it. But I also miss the human interaction. I miss face-to-face meetings. So that's probably the only part of it that changed.
Yeah, actually, that's how you and I met, through a LinkedIn message.
Yeah.
And yeah, I definitely agree. I don't think remote work is all rosy. I don't think I'm not one of those proponents of like, oh yeah, everybody could just work on their computer in their house. As an example today, I mean, even though we're a company that looks at the future of work, I actually asked my colleagues to be with me because I just want to, after the end of this, I want to be able to high five someone or cry with someone if it doesn't work out. And there are just some things you can't do remotely. Another question that we got from our audience, and I think a lot of us are worried about the job market and how it's evolving and how we can be most ready for it. And the question we received is, what is your best advice for applicants in the job market who want to cater their profiles to respond to the new needs of the post-COVID world? I know that's a little bit outside of the scope, but definitely, what are the skills that you think people need to have in order to be relevant in today's job market?
I think.
Go ahead, Nihal. I can go after. I'll go after you.
I was just going to say, look beyond your borders. I don't think remote work is going to go away. I think it's going to increase. You are not limited by your geography anymore. You are basically, even if the job description says, I don't know, says something like Riyadh or Bahrain, you know what? You're going to be online for the foreseeable future. And if you can make it work, I think a lot of organizations are going to continue this way. It's going to open up a lot of doors for remote talent. So I think that's one piece of advice.
Brilliant. Dhiren.
Yeah, I think what Nihal said really hit the nail on the head. And I want to add to that and say that I think, and as much as a valid question that is, I think that the basics haven't changed in that I see a lot of applicants come through to us and their resumes are all over the place. If you could pick up a niche and excel in that niche, then like Nihal said, the doors are open, the borders are open. Anybody and everybody would want that sort of specific talent coming into their organization. So as opposed to saying I'm a this and a this and a this, I do this and I do this amazingly well. And that could be for systems, for example, I do CRM systems fantastically well. I've worked with all of them, but that's exactly what I do and I know them inside out. As opposed to saying I do CRM and I do HR and I do productivity. I think it can add a little bit of ambiguity. So if there's a niche or if you know the one thing that you're good at and if you were to highlight that, I think that sort of really, really adds value to that and credibility to that person. And I'd want to bring that person in if I'm looking for that talent.
Brilliant.
So
we have a great comment from someone in the audience. I just want to read it out because I think that Imad is making a very beautiful point. He's saying, other than customer and employee adaptation to new realities, it's just as important in bigger organizations that board of directors and shareholders are educated about new realities to approve policies and budgets necessary to keep the organization competitive. And I really echo that. I mean, when companies undergo profound digital disruption, and I'm not just talking about digitizing their processes, but really reimagining their work in a digital world, there's a dip in profitability, there's a dip in revenues, and that dip usually lasts about 3 years. And so it's not, this has to be something that people who can sponsor these projects and have a long-term view on the business really do support. And thank you, Imad. That's a really amazing comment, actually. So we're almost out of time. I want to ask you the one question that we're going to ask all of our panelists, and maybe we can start with Renad. I want you to finish the sentence, the future of work is, use a word, and then explain to us why you chose that word.
So the future of work for me is, immediately I say collaboration. I think in this time, especially, we mentioned this in the beginning of our conference, is that people are going to be less required to work in the same office with others and without direct oversight. I think we're going to be more evaluated based on our output, as you guys mentioned, and how we contribute to the team. So that's key for me, I think.
Brilliant. Nihal, the future of work is?
I'll use 2 words, Marilyn. So really exciting. I think that this is going to be a really good chance for organizations, for partners that are abroad to bring their services, to take their services globally. You no longer need to be physically present to provide a really great service or a really great product. And I think this is going to open the doors, not just for IT companies and partners, but I also think even for customers, they're going to see a new, they're going to have access to a new talent pool. They're going to have access to some really great products and services that before were not available due to the need to be physically present.
Brilliant. And Dhiren, the future of work is?
I was going to say, I'm going to beat Nihal. I'm going to say it's 4 words. Not that this is a competition, but I think it would sound very awkward if I just used one word. So I think the future of work is being able to accept change. And I know this is the theme of this whole conference, but the idea behind change, not just in the way you work, but in the way your customers work, and realizing and putting yourself in their shoes to figure out what is it that they need and how can we change better. And also accept, like Imad was saying, let the leadership teams accept change and be part of that role with that, rather than being very sort of rigid. And not that everybody wants to be rigid, but you want to be open-minded to that change can happen quicker, and it has and will continue to happen much quicker than it has happened over the last few years. So I think that's the future of work.
Brilliant. Thank you. That's a really amazing way to wrap this up. I definitely think that a lot of it is about us opening ourselves up to change, to speed, to new ways of looking at things that have been sitting around. I mean, I don't think any of this is like just came up. It didn't come up last week. It's always been there, but there's definitely an acceleration and an opening up of borders. And we need to get a little bit more creative about how we think about ourselves as employees and managers and companies and customers and kind of get with the times. I think that's a beautiful way of wrapping it up. Definitely a lot of change has come our way in the last few months, and sometimes it's a bit exhausting, but it's also can be very exciting. Before we close this session, I just wanted to thank all of our panelists once again for joining us and taking the time out of your day to come and contribute all this amazing knowledge. Your insights were really incredibly valuable. You've left us with quite a bit to think about, and so many different ideas to sort of pull on and see where they take us. A huge thank you as well to our attendees for tuning in, engaging, asking questions, and their amazing comments. Obviously, the video will be available and it'll be reposted on our various channels on LinkedIn and Facebook and on our website in the future. Just before I close up, I wanted to remind everybody that we have a competition to be one of 5 companies who can win a free consultation with Cosmic Centaurs. All you have to do is go on the event page on our website and tell us what kind of challenges your organizations are facing and how we can support you. And then also mention that we have a session coming up at 1 p.m., which is going to be focused about the impact of remote work on the balance sheet and the P&L of companies. And is it a very obvious decision to make to cut down office space, or can there be long-term negative impact of having people working so far away from one another? So that's going to happen at 1 p.m. Please tune Dubai time. Please tune in. Thank you again so much, Dhiren, Nihal, and Renad. I'm really so grateful that you gave us your time and your amazing ideas. And I look forward to having you at our next edition of the Cosmic Conferences. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Marilyn.
Thank you, Marilyn. It's been a pleasure being here.
Bye, Renad and Dhiren. Bye, everyone.
Bye, guys. Nice to meet you guys. Bye.